Hello and welcome to the LLG Grapevine podcast. You're listening to Helen Bennett, LLG's Executive Director of Policy and Governance, and Dennis Hall, LLG Bulletin Editor.
Hello, everyone.
Now, I was away last edition and I already know I've missed quite a lot, not least the news that the Court of Appeal has agreed to hear an appeal of the Competition Appeal Tribunal's dismissal of a Subsidy Control Act challenge against Greater Manchester Combined Authority over £140 million in loans given to developers. It's interesting, Dennis, and one to watch. But for today's edition, let's walk through last week's bulletin and something of a personal obsession of mine, remote meetings for local authorities in England, Dennis.
Yes, well, local government organisations have warned the absence of remote or hybrid meeting provisions in the English Devolution and Community Empowerment Bill represents a serious missed opportunity to strengthen local democracy, improve accessibility and future-proof local governance. Writing in a joint letter to the Minister of State, Alison McGovern, the National Digital Democracy Partnership said that the omission comes despite overwhelming sector-wide consensus that councils should have the flexibility to decide how best to conduct their meetings.
Yep, that's right. And the partnership, and I'll just declare, I do sit on the task force representing LLG on that. It includes ADSO, the LLG, the LGA, now SLCC and SOCOTIM. And in this letter, we pointed to the outcome of a recent consultation, which saw the government commit to supporting plans to allow authorities to develop their own local appropriate policies on remote meetings. Now, what we're saying as a partnership was that the local government reorganisation agenda and increased concern over councillors' safety, that's in the news a lot, has made the case for reforms even more pressing.
Well, councils are currently in the early stages of reorganising and creating new strategic authorities in line with the government's plans for local government. These new authorities will be making decisions right now about their governance and meeting arrangements, including investment in technology, staff development and accommodation strategies, the letter said.
Well, that's right, Dennis. And you would think it's far better to start a new authority with the knowledge of those elements already being in place. As the letter said, we made the point, without the option of remote or hybrid meetings, it risks, locking outdated and less flexible systems for years to come into the new authorities, or at least significantly increasing costs due to having to adapt to those systems. And that reorganisation presents a challenge for councillors, obviously, who will need to decide whether to stand for re-election for these newly created authorities without knowing, and this is crucial, if they will be able to join meetings remotely or not. So without that knowledge, will some people feel that they can't step up? And the partnership knows that for local authorities who cover larger geographical areas, the ability to attend meetings remotely definitely makes that role more accessible to a far wider range of people.
Well, yes, but going on, the letter says this challenge is particularly pronounced for combined and strategic authorities which cover very large geographic areas. And on the question of councillor safety, the letter highlighted growing concern about councillor safety with an increasing number of reported incidents of threats, violence and intimidation. And the letter said, providing the choice to attend meetings remotely offers a practical, immediate way to help protect councillors and ensure they can continue to participate safely and confidently. And the letter suggested hosting a meeting between the groups and the department to discuss these matters as soon as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And I very much hope that takes place. The letter is on our website. It's linked in the bulletin. Do take a look at it. Now, I'm going to turn to a very serious matter. We learned from the government that children exposed to the family courts will be protected from harm under plans to repeal the presumption of parental involvement. Now, the repeal is founded on the clear principle that every child deserves to be safe. Yet there's new evidence published which shows that assuming it's always in the best interests of a child to have the involvement of both parents can perpetrate abuse.
Now, although the current law includes safeguards to restrict involvement where it is detrimental to a child's welfare, removing this law will send a clear message, the government says, that it is placing the well-being and safety of children at the forefront of decision-making. And the change follows the tireless campaigning of Claire Throssell, whose children, Jack and Paul, were tragically killed by their abusive father 11 years ago this week.
Yeah, terrible. Deputy Prime Minister David Lammy, in response to this announcement, said that every decision he makes in the justice system will prioritise children's safety, their well-being, and their right to grow up free from harm. And he went on to talk about Claire Throssell. He referred to her as simply remarkable and emphasised that her courage in the face of unimaginable tragedy, her determination to prevent other families from suffering as she has, and her relentless advocacy for children's safety has been instrumental in bringing about this vital change. And hear to that.
Well, indeed. Well, Claire Throssell, now MBE and the Survivor Ambassador of Women's Aid, said in response that for almost a decade, Women's Aid and I have worked together campaigning to change the family courts and improve laws to ensure that children at risk of further harm from abusive parents have a brighter, safer future, free from fear and oppression. And going on, she said, every child deserves to be heard, seen, supported, and believed, to have a childhood and to live. And continuing, she said, successive governments have failed to protect children, standing by an outdated presumption that it is in the child's best interests to have a contact with both their parents, even when there have been allegations of domestic abuse. We have campaigned, she said, campaigned tirelessly to have this presumption removed from family law and practice, because until this narrative changes, more children like Jack and Paul will continue to die.
Mm. Well, this is the latest action to tackle abuse in the family courts and improve the experience and outcomes for children. Earlier this year, the government expanded a pilot of it's quite a novel approach to the family courts. It's known as Pathfinder courts, which has the aim to improve the court experience and outcomes for children and parents involved in private family law proceedings, including those who have experience of domestic abuse. Now, Farah Nazir, she's the chief executive of Women's Aid, said changes to the presumption are an important first step, but with the existing pro-contact culture being deep-rooted in the family courts, comprehensive action needs to be taken to overturn these dangerous attitudes and beliefs that are putting lives at risk. And Women's Aid urges both the government and family courts to engage with expert organisations like themselves to ensure the creation of a family justice system that is safe for all adults and children through further implementation of the harm panel's recommendations.
Earlier this week, the government also announced plans to automatically restrict the exercise of parental responsibility in cases where a person with parental responsibility has been convicted of a serious sexual offence. And these amendments can be found in the Victims and Courts Bill. But to be clear, the Ministry of Justice will legislate to repeal the presumption of parental involvement only when parliamentary time allows. And on the new restriction on the exercise of parental responsibility measures, convictions of serious sexual offences against a child must come with a sentence of 4 years or more.
Well, it's a start, Dennis, isn't it?
Indeed.
I'd like to return to a subject we've raised quite a bit in the podcast this year, and that's special education needs. There's been more news on this, Dennis, hasn't there?
Yes, there has. The Department for Education has postponed publication of a white paper setting out fundamental reforms in policy and law covering special educational needs. Announced by Chancellor Rachel Reeves in June's spending review, the white paper's publication was scheduled for this autumn, but it will now appear early in the new year.
Well, the announcement came in a letter from Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson to Helen Hayes, the chair of the Comms Educational Select Committee. Now, Hayes's committee published a report last month. It was entitled Solving the SEND Crisis. And that came after months of hearings and, of course, taking evidence. Now, Bridget Phillipson wrote, in that, I have taken the decision to have a further period of co-creation, testing our proposals with the people who matter most in this reform the families, alongside teachers and other experts, as you highlight in the Select Committee's report.
Now, the prospect of reform is controversial because ministers have repeatedly refused to rule out the removal of existing legal rights for children with special educational needs. And key DfE advisors on SEND policy have floated the possibility of removing or limiting education, health and care plans. Around 500,000 children have EHCPs, which have legally enforceable elements and set out the support needed by the child, including the educational setting that will deliver it.
Yeah, but we know, don't we, that schools are struggling to meet those
Yes, indeed.
enforceable elements and authorities. We see it all the time, especially from the Ombudsman. Well, I mean, the cost of such support is met by local authorities, we know that, and their representative bodies have long called for reforms. The chair of the Local Government Association's Children, Young People and Families Committee, that's Amanda Hopgood, called the delay disappointing, and she added that councils have been pushed to the brink by rising high needs deficits.
Phillipson's letter does not address the issue of whether existing legal rights will be maintained. Instead, she said, where specialist provision is needed for children in mainstream, we will ensure it is there, with clear legal requirements and safeguards for children and parents. Now, in June, the Law Society Gazette reported on a threat to the status of the SEND Tribunal as a forum for education disputes. However, the tribunal is not mentioned in this letter. Well, of course, we'll have more on this topic over the coming months.
Yeah, and I think they will look at the tribunal. I mean, if you look back at the stats, and I haven't looked recently, but a couple of years ago, the percentage success rate in the tribunal was phenomenal. It was in the 90s. So we shouldn't really speculate, but I suspect there might be more noise around the tribunal. It's an incredibly important area, isn't it? So
yes.
Now on to other matters, and let's turn our attention again to the LGA. So the Local Government Association have written to the Chancellor to highlight and demonstrate the support and value that councils can bring and provide to the UK government in delivering the objectives of the Autumn Budget 2025.
In the letter, they say that ultimately, empowered and financially sustainable councils hold the key both to addressing the needs of their local communities and to enabling government to tackle challenging areas of policy reform. And in particular, as locally rooted bodies with a democratic mandate, councils have a local legitimacy and are best able to work with residents and across public services to find ways to meet communities' needs, drive change and improve services.
Yes, and the LGA also stated that whilst it recognised and welcomed the reset relationship and new way of working between central and local government, as they say clearly was demonstrated by the introduction of the Leaders' Council, this has also laid the foundations for closer working between local and central government. But they also warned that the government has more to do, and it urged the government to use its budget to invest in and support councils to allow them to deliver to their full potential, both to support local communities and also to address national priorities.
The LGA noted within their letter that its analysis shows that in the 3 years from 2022 to 23 to 2024 to 25, the sector had annual average overspends. Listen to this, it's fascinating. Average overspends of 5.2% of budgeted spend for adult social care, 14.2% for children's social care, 25.1% for home-to-school transport for children with SEND, and 51.9% for homelessness. Staggering.
That is staggering. I mean, I know home-to-school transport is a big financial issue for local authorities. The LGA also noted that in terms of council's budget data for 25-26, again, this shows large increases in annual planned spend, 9% for adult social care, 10.1% for children's social care, 38.8% for homelessness. And nonetheless, data for council's Q1 spending across these three services indicates that their budgets, their 25-26 budgets, are already under pressure, and that there is a clear potential for overspend in line with the previous 3 years within these services, as you've outlined, Dennis.
Yeah, and crucially, the LGA makes the point that all of this means that council services are becoming concentrated on a residual body of demand-led services, which reduces a council's service offer to local residents and limits council's ability to invest in cost-saving preventative measures or tackle shared local and national objectives.
Mm. Well, I mean, look, there's a lot to this letter, and I really would urge everyone to take the time to read it. It's on the LGA website, and it's also linked in the bulletin, of course. Now, an interesting enforcement case, Dennis, and it made the news, I believe.
Well, indeed, it did. Perhaps you should have a coffee while I begin this one. The London Borough of Richmond upon Thames has reversed its decision to fine a woman £150 for pouring the remnants of her coffee down a street drain. Now, according to a report on the BBC, Berku Yeziliut poured a small amount from her reusable cup down the drain in order to avoid spilling it on the bus she was about to catch to work. Seemed reasonable to me, mind. However, she was stopped by three enforcement officers at the bus stop near Richmond Station and given a fine under Section 33 of the Environmental Protection Act 1990, which makes it an offence to deposit or dispose of waste in a way likely to pollute land or water.
Well, the council confirmed it has now cancelled the fixed penalty notice, acknowledging that the contravention was minor, which the recipient agreed not to repeat. Speaking to the BBC, however, the individual concerned said her encounter with the enforcement officers left her feeling shaky as she went into work. And I could see how that would happen if you're an
Well,
ordinary
yes, I wouldn't like to
law-abiding
be.
citizen and you're
I wouldn't like to be.
accosted.
Yes, I wouldn't like to be
Yeah,
confronted by three enforcement officers.
no.
However, the council claimed the enforcement officers did act appropriately and with sympathy and were in no way aggressive. Ms. Yeziliot told the BBC that when she asked the officers what she was supposed to have done with her remaining coffee, she was told to pour it in a nearby bin. Now, a Richmond Council spokesman said, "We have reviewed the body-worn footage of the incident, and from this it is clear that a contravention did take place. Contrary to the suggestion in reports, the enforcement officers acted appropriately and with sympathy. They were in no way aggressive."
No, they've been very clear about that. I,
Yeah.
do we want bins being filled up with liquids in that way for bin men to come and have to empty? I
Nope.
mean, that sounds fairly messy. But
Hmm.
the council also went on, made a further statement saying that fixed penalty notices clearly outline that there is an appeal process available to anyone who wishes to challenge them, and it's likely that had this case progressed through that route, the notice would have been rescinded because it's a minor contravention. I did think when I read it, it was de minimis.
Yeah.
And the recipient agreed not to repeat it, they said. So the council has therefore decided to cancel and remove the FPN.
Yes, and they went on, "We remain committed," the council said, "to protecting Richmond's waterways and keeping our borough's streets clean and safe. We are also reviewing our advice on the disposal of liquids in a public place and will be updating this information on our website." Helen, some might think that this was a storm in a coffee cup, perhaps.
Oh my God, Dennis. Good effort. Well,
Thank you.
I mean, it's an interesting case. It's all about
It is.
fact and degree, isn't it? And about training. I mean, I think they're right that they need, you can't have people throwing stuff all willy-nilly, but um, yeah,
Yeah.
probably sensible outcome in the end. Now,
Yeah.
finally, taken from the local government lawyer, with credit and thanks to Adam Carey, if he's listening. Hi, Adam. Um, this is the news that Durham County Council has amended its code of conduct for members to include protections for freedom of expression in a move the council's deputy leader has said would help curb vexatious complaints. I find this fascinating, actually.
Mm.
So the leader of Durham County Council is Darren Grimes, and he has reportedly said that changes which invoke Article 10 of the European Convention of Human Rights and Article 10 of the Human Rights Act 1998 would, quote, unchain the monitoring officer and the council's legal departments so that they could get on with the job of delivering for this council.
Well, let's take a look at how the code has been amended, Helen. In effect, the council has added an additional paragraph which states, and I'll quote it in full, The right to freedom of expression under Article 10 of the European Convention on Human Rights is the basis of democracy and will be upheld at all times. Members have a democratic duty to represent their constituents and engage in robust political debate. Therefore, in a political context, a degree of immoderate, offensive, shocking, or provocative expression is acceptable.
Yes. The leader at the meeting actually did say, I suppose I'd better start by declaring an interest in this, given that I've been the subject of many of the complaints since May last year. But he did add that I want the real business of governing for the people of County Durham to be delivered and actually start to get done in a serious way. And he went on in that vein. I'll quote him. He said, "You can't do that if you're going through reams and reams of complaints that amount to absolutely nothing other than a disagreement with someone based on a political belief."
Now, the MO report which accompanied the amendment proposal rightly and properly pointed out that elected representatives have rights to freedom of expression under Article 10 of the European Convention on Human Rights and, of course, the Human Rights Act 1998. And the report says that these rights are considered as part of any assessment of member code of conduct complaints, which relate to statements or expressions made by members in speeches or in writing, including on social media.
Well, the report added that the Article 10 rights includes the right for an individual to express their views through public protest and demonstrations, published articles, books, leaflets, television, radio broadcasting, even works of art, the internet, and social media, of course. That I always think being the thorny one. But it contained a salutary reminder that notwithstanding these rights, individuals do have a duty to behave responsibly and to respect other people's rights.
And the report also explains quite rightly that speech restrictions can also be implemented to protect the rights and reputations of other people, to prevent the disclosure of information received in confidence, and to maintain the authority and impartiality of judges. And it also noted that expressions by political representatives are subject to enhanced protections.
Do you know, Dennis, I think Article 10 interpretations are a minefield. Um, and
Hmm.
I'm going and you know, the code of conduct, the model code of conduct, I'm not sure. I think there was some criticism at the start around dealing with this social media Article 10 freedoms, and certainly which hat you're wearing when you're saying what. And I'm going to say here, I'll go out on a limb and say that there are some case law examples I don't think have helped the situation one bit. But it's an interesting move. Let's see if any other council follows suit. Um, it's interesting embedding into a code an already legislative provision. But
Yes, I just don't know how much it's added to
well,
the
yeah,
code. I mean, I accept because as an independent person, I know that these principles, this legislation and the convention are applied as the statement added to the code indicates. But by putting it into the code doesn't actually add anything. It's the law whether it's in the code or not, if you see what
yeah.
I mean.
No, that's what I was thinking. But maybe the intention is to concentrate the mind of others in
Yes,
terms of their complaints. So let's
it's
see if another.
signaling, isn't it, rather than anything else? It's a signal.
Yes, absolutely. Let's see if any other council follows suit. It'd be interesting to see if the Ethics Commission make any noises in this
Yeah, well,
area.
yes, yes.
Let's see. Well, on that note, that's it for another edition of the podcast. You can read more on the items discussed today, many more besides, by going to bulletin number 37, available on the LG website now. So it's goodbye from me.
And from me too. Bye bye.